The September 14th meeting of the council to order at 7 o'clock. Ms. Wiles, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Happy to. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Cummings, could you do the roll call?
Mr. Ayr.
Present.
Mr. Boyce.
Present.
Mr. Davis.
Present.
Mr. O'Connor. Here. Mr. Schwartz.
Present.
Mr. Smith.
Present.
Ms. Wiles.
Present.
Mr. Peterson.
Here.
Mr. President, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Can I have approval of the minutes of the executive session memorandum dated August 24th?
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion to approve the executive session memorandum of August 24th and a second. There's a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 8-0. Can I have approval of the minutes of the August 24th budget meeting?
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion to approve the minutes of our August 24th budget meeting and a second. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. 8-0. Approval of the minutes of our August 24th meeting.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion to approve the minutes and a second of our August 24th meeting. This is also a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 8-0. On to approval of the agenda.
Mr. President, I would move to amend the agenda to move miscellaneous number 3 to be heard after the approval of claims.
Second.
There's a motion to amend the agenda to move miscellaneous 3 to after the claims in a second. This is a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 8-0.
Mr. President, I would move that we approve the agenda as amended.
Second.
Motion to approve the agenda as amended in a second. This is a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 8-0. Petitions or comments by citizens. I have one from Israel Mencheka. I assume you want to speak during the item on the agenda, or you're going to speak now? Thank you. Anyone else who would like to speak from the mayor's office, perhaps? Okay, thank you. I was told you wanted to say a few words, but I was mistaken. Thank you. Council committee reports. Roads.
Oh, sorry, that is me. The Roads Committee met on September 3rd. Greg O'Connor was there along with myself. Brian Aaron, Mr. Boyce were absent. We got an update on a slew of items. 146th Street lighting, those quotes have come back a little bit more expensive than we had expected. So the engineering department is going back and looking through options that we have there. Street rehabilitation, that is ongoing. We might hear from our friends with the Historic Preservation Alliance about a partnership that we have with an alley that we are going through right now, and that is going well. The awards for paving, a lot has been completed already. There's still some work that is outstanding. A lot of that on the east side of the city will be scheduled for mid-September. Continuing on, Harriman Boulevard was tied in with the State Road 37 146th Street project. The scope for Harriman Boulevard from IDI to 146th Street is expected, that construction is expected to begin this week. As the mayor pointed out last time we met, the corporate campus infrastructure improvement project, which is Oleo from 141st to 146th Street, is now open. The ribbon cutting was August 31st, and substantial completion should be in November. We spent a lot of time talking about 146th Street over Allisonville Road interchange. That is a county project that is expected to be, letting is expected in fall of '22. At that point, once that's under construction, Allisonville Road is expected to be closed for 6 to 8 months. So that's going to be a really big communications effort that we're going to have to partner with on the county. So Mr. O'Connor was talking through ways that we can partner with to effectively work with people that live in the Wellingtons to ensure that they are able to get through town. We went through the normal talking points that we had on State Road 32 and those projects that are coming through. That's going along as planned. State Road 37, 191st Street intersection improvement. This was a new piece. The city had requested to work with NDOT to get a crosswalk across State Road 37, and NDOT did say that they supported that. So that is still a few years out, but that is a big way that we can connect the east side of 37 to downtown Noblesville. We talked a little bit about trails. The South Allisonville Road Trail, the letting is expected for October and construction in '22. We also talked about Little Chicago Road Trail over Morse Lake and Stony Creek Trail under State Road 37. Both of those have letting in '22 with construction in '23. And we did talk a little bit about downtown district and the Bridge of Flowers. That was also talked about at downtown district committee. So I'll let Ms. Wiles talk through the details on that, but that was also brought up at roads. And I think that is it.
Thank you. Any questions? No questions? We'll move on to the downtown district.
Yes, the Downtown District Committee met on Friday, September 10th. Brian Ayer, Darren Peterson, Aaron Smith, and myself were present. We went through a discussion about the status of our funds and really taking a look at where we are to date. You may recall that we set aside $75,000 for the Economic Development Department and our staff members to be able to utilize those funds for some of those smaller projects. When we look at all of those, we're about $5,000 or $6,000 left of that $75,000 that was set aside. Total for the rest of this year, we still have about $175,000 available to spend. However, there are a few things that will be utilized with those funds. So we've talked about flower pots for the Levinson that we already had purchased for the Levinson project. We actually moved those to the Bridge of Flowers project so that we were able to start with those flower pots. So we need to replace those. And it's amazing how much flower pots cost, but we're doing that. We talked about the South Alley and that it was suggested that we install 2 arches in the South Alley, one closest to Connor Street and one a little further back closer to the Levinson to really create a space there. And the committee agreed to that. We talked through parking garage signage for the Levinson, which will be opening very soon. So each level will have a distinct color and theme, and that we're going to be doing the same type of theme for the parking garage at Village at Federal Hill. And we're going to also share it with the county with the hope that they would take that color scheme and files and do the same thing at the county parking garage so that we've got a consistent look all throughout downtown for our parking garages and those different levels. We are going to be working on some freestanding parking signs to be able to help direct people to where those parking garages are, and it will be part of our continued updating of our wayfinding signage. We were planning to do a much bigger kind of redo as a part of the downtown streetscape plan, but because that's on pause, we're going to do a temporary fix and then continue to take a look at it. Mrs. Reed is going to bring some additional plans to us at our next meeting, so I might have more to share with you then. As I shared, we have about $175,000, but we have several projects where we want to be able to kind of set aside money for upcoming projects in future years. So one of those is NDOT's going to come and redo State Road 32 and 38 through downtown Noblesville, and at that time, we'd love for them to install decorative signal poles. They're willing to do that, but at the cost to the city. So we're trying to set aside some of the we also realized it would not be a downtown district report if we didn't talk about streetlights. We're getting very close to not talk about streetlights, but we had anticipated that the streetlights that are on the south side of Connor Street and with the East Bank project, that those lights were going to be going away as a part of that, all of that project. That's not the case. So we really need to go and replace those lights with the same black street lights that we have throughout the rest of the downtown area. So they're Austin. We encouraged the engineering department to go ahead and place that order because there's normally a significant lead time before we receive them. So that will be approximately $30,000 out of that remaining 175 that we have for this year.
How many?
For how many streetlights?
Yeah.
8, I
Nine.
believe, 8 or 9.
Yeah.
We did talk about the Bridge of Flowers, and preliminary plans are to be complete by October 8th from our consultants. So we'll come back and then have a better estimate of what that whole project's going to cost, and then we can be talking through with our partner, Noblesville Bridge of Flowers Group, as well as the county, to determine who can pay for what. And then we also talked a little bit about the Logan Street Trail, and that there are some design documents for that to make some improvements for Logan Street, heading on out west to the Cityscape project. And that's really it.
Thank you. Any questions?
Assuming those decorative poles for the street light, the stoplights will be black.
They will, yes.
Decorative as well.
Definitely.
Any other questions? None. Finance Committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. We met Thursday, September 9th. Myself, Greg O'Connor, and Megan Wiles were council members present. Lindsay Byers discussed amendment to the employee salary ordinance for a paralegal position. Chuck Hagerman discussed the economic development agreement with the farm project. We're going to hear about some of that tonight. Mr. Light and Mr. Bears discussed the 2022 civil city budget. Mr. Spalding talked the high AV levy growth appeal. And Mr. Spalding also talked the 2022 one-year bond. That was it, and the claims come to the council with a favorable recommendation.
Thank you. Any questions?
Mr. President?
Yeah.
I'd move that we approve the claims as submitted.
Second.
Motion to approve the claims in a second. This is a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 8-0. On to miscellaneous number 3. Council to hear an annual report from the Noblesville Preservation Alliance. Sandy Stewart. The always happy Sandy Stewart.
Pretty much always. My name is Sandy Stewart. I'm president of the Noblesville Preservation Alliance, also known as Miscellaneous 3 tonight. I have left each of you a packet with my report. I understand you have a packed agenda, so I'll be as brief as possible. The most important thing I have to say to you is thank you. Thank you for supporting the work of Noblesville Preservation Alliance, as well as the other not-for-profits in our community. Clearly, you recognize that arts and service organizations make our community such a wonderful place to live. So thank you for investing in us and believing in us. The second thing I want to say is, while this may sound a bit trite, we couldn't have done what we've done this year without you. Absolutely not. I've given you a pictorial history of the building before it came to us, and then once the metamorphosis section is once we took possession. We purchased the building with a $75,000 endangered structures interest-free loan from Indiana Landmarks. And $55,000 of our own fundraising proceeds. We used to be very good at raising money with events until our visitor in 2020 kind of interrupted our plans a bit. So we had to be inventive. The third page has the restoration up to the present. It should be finished by Saturday because we're going to be using it on our home tour. There will be music on the porch, and we'll be making root beer and Coke floats and selling vintage recipe cookies out front. You all have an invitation here to our VIP banquet that always occurs after. It will be at Preservation Hall in the yard and outside. It will be catered by Mateo's, and you will be our guest. We do it for our volunteers and our sponsors, and as all of you have supported our event. We got one volunteer over here too, working in a house. I included the old brochure, the capital campaign brochure with the sponsorship levels because it has a little bit of the history of the organization and why we purchased this building and why we purchased this particular building. Also this will be the first post-COVID concert. I hope you'll all plan to attend. It's the Rough and Tumble, a loyal group of a couple of gypsies that were supposed to perform last year, the night before the home tour, and had to stop touring because of COVID, of course, and we were not able to have the home tour, so they would have been lonely. But they kept us in mind, and they're coming back. They will be here on Thursday the 30th. So one of our intentions with the building, other than just our business, is to have community events like the concert series that was previously there. Now, when I want you to look at the pitifully sad financial page that has the use of, we received a $15,000 community grant, and we also received a $25,000 facade grant. And with those monies, and what we've been able to raise with our new events, our flea market, and we have gotten, we did get one sponsorship since we got back to normal, a $5,000 pew sponsorship, so things are starting to turn around a bit. But one of the conditions of the loan from Landmarks is that we do a complete historic restoration of the exterior of the building to their standards, and you may believe me that their standards are exacting. You see the line item for $1,500 for custom-made stone to match the old foundation. But we're a preservation organization, so if we're going to do a restoration, it should be an example to the rest of the community. But just to give you an idea of how tightly we're working here, we have paid one invoice. The first one was $17,000. That invoice was paid with the first installment of the community grant of $7,500 and the fundraising proceeds from our two flea markets and some donations. The second, we received a second invoice that isn't paid yet. It will be paid when we get the second installment of the $7,500 from the community grant, and we have turned in the first to the facade grant committee, and they will reimburse 50% of that. So that together will pay this one, and then we will roll that. We'll submit the 50% for the next stage. And continue to accomplish as much as we can with volunteers. Serve Noblesville removed the vinyl siding, except at the very, very tippy top, because they said their ages ranged from 68 to 75, and they weren't getting that high. And at the bottom is, I have a list of things that we have yet to do. The first thing that we will address is moving the ramp, and I like to recognize that we had a nice donation from Peterson Architecture of drawings, plans, and we also, Ready Mix Concrete is going to pay for so we think we can move that ramp with volunteers, and so that, I'm not sure we can cut the new handicap interest in the building, but we may try. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. And I hope, if you don't have any, I hope to see you Saturday evening for an old-fashioned, and the people working at Preservation Hall will be in costume, old-fashioned costume. So you don't want to miss that.
How many people are you expecting on Saturday?
Pardon?
How many people are you expecting on Saturday?
I don't have I tried to get a ticket count before. We usually, I think our highest has been about, I think we had 2,500 one time. We don't expect it to be that high. I will tell you that sponsorships, we have gotten about 50% of previous sponsorships. So things are not totally back to normal, and we don't know how people are going to feel about touring houses. We are providing masks and sanitizer for everyone, but it's going to be a success, even if it's only 500 people.
Sorry, Mr. Smith.
Yeah, no, I don't have a question. I just wanted to illustrate a way that the city has worked together with the Preservation Alliance. I had mentioned it a little bit in the Roads Committee report, and Downtown District Committee knows, but there's an alley right off, in between 9th and 10th Street, right off Maple, that half of it's brick. And half of it's brick, part of it's patched, and it's in pretty poor shape. And so we worked together with the Preservation Alliance to extract the brick that is in good shape, place it in a sustainable way, and then write up, a history on the brick alleys. And you guys took the first stab at it, and that's going to be on a nice bronze plaque by there. And so I think that it's just a really good partnership, and a good way to illustrate how our relationship has strengthened, and that we're able to, acknowledge, the past in a really great way.
Well, and I think it's really indicative of the approach that's being taken by this administration. You could have paved over it. You recognize that it was the last brick alley and that it had value. And we were thrilled with the opportunity to keep it and remind people of what it meant at one time, how it used to be.
Yeah. So thank you for your relationship with us.
Oh, thank you.
It's been great.
You've also sold yourself a little short. I noticed you attend a lot of the BZA hearings and talk about historic topics when they come up too, and I appreciate your input.
The day after I moved to town, and I live on Connor Street in one of the historic homes, the day after the house next door to me came up for rezoning to commercial. And it's not really my nature to tell someone what to do with their home. And at first I said, when my preservation friends, I wasn't involved with the Alliance, and I said, I'm not going to sign a petition because I'm not paying the mortgage. And then I did some research. I looked at the master plan of the city. I looked at the fact that a commercial rezone hadn't been granted for over 25 years and that there was absolutely no reason to grant this one. And then I started appearing. So, and I appreciate, again, that the city listens to things like that. It matters.
Appreciate you getting involved.
And I think we're all equally proud of our historic city. And we want to keep it as much as possible, but we want a little progress along the way too.
Thank you, Sandy.
Sure.
You got a planning meeting tonight too, don't you, for Saturday? So we'll let you get out
Make
here.
sure you send me that email, Sandy.
All right, new ordinances for discussion. Council to consider ordinance 550721A, an ordinance amending ordinance 550721, a salary ordinance for appointed officials and employees of the city of Noblesville.
Move to introduce.
Second.
Lindsay Bennett.
Good evening, Council. Lindsay Bennett, City Attorney. I am here tonight to request a change to our salary ordinance to include a paralegal for the 2021 budget. The position of operations manager is going to become open soon, and some of the duties that current position fulfills, I was hoping to kind of take over under my purview once I was able to get a paralegal. And also we've got some litigation coming up that will be very useful for me to have a paralegal at the start to get things organized. Because there is a payroll position open and a few extra dollars in the 100 series because of the operations manager vacating that position, the mayor's office was kind enough to offer me those funds so that I could maybe bring somebody on a little early. So tonight I'm just here to request that the salary ordinance be changed to include that position. The pay would be $2,500 biweekly pay, which equals $65,000. I did some research on some salaries in the area just by looking at the Indiana Gateway and some of the benefits that are offered in the different surrounding communities. And they range anywhere from $51,000 to $83,000. And taking into account our benefit package, $65,000 seemed to be competitive. Happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions? No questions? We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Council to consider ordinance 610921, an ordinance establishing the 2022 budget.
Move to introduce.
Second.
Chris Jensen.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the council. Pleasure to be with you, although we've been together several hours this evening already, and some of you have been together all day. I feel like I've had an out-of-body experience the first 10 minutes of this meeting to have the Preservation Alliance here talking about how great we're all working together. Wasn't always the case, and it's great. Sandy Stewart and her team are just phenomenal partners and fighting passionately for the preservation of our community, which I fully support. And actually leads me beautifully into my next topic, which is to introduce tonight's budget for the 2022 fiscal year. You know, it's amazing what a difference a year makes. A year ago, I was standing in front of you with very uncertain times ahead of us. I often get asked what has been one of my most challenging experiences as mayor of the past 20 months. And I can tell you from a administrative operational standpoint, it was the decision that we made in conjunction with you in 2021 to hold our budget neutral and flat, to hold our salaries flat in 2021, and to hold our employee headcount flat. I believe that was the right decision. Appreciate you all supporting that last year, but I think you all would agree that was difficult. In a city of 65,000 at the time, and now with the new census numbers, nearly 70,000 people, making us the 10th largest city in the state of Indiana. Those were some challenges that we had to face, and I appreciate you all coming alongside us as we face them. Today, as we go into 2022, it's a different time, and we're fortunate enough that we have weathered, we continue to weather that storm of COVID-19. From a fiscal standpoint, we feel very confident in the position that we are in as a city going forward. We were blessed to, when we came into office, to inherit some pretty healthy reserves as well. I appreciate our predecessors and those who came before us for having strong fiscal conservative management going forward. So tonight's budget I introduced to you, and I thank you, first of all. So many of you, I've talked with you individually. This has been one of the smoothest budget seasons we have gone through. And I credit that to you and your willingness to come alongside and meet. So many people don't realize the number of hours that you put in behind the scenes, not just at council meetings, but meeting with department heads to understand their needs, their wants, their wish lists. We asked you early on, 2.5 months ago, to sit down with department liaisons to understand what they want. So when it came time for budget presentations, you were well versed in that, and you agreed to that. Each one of you took hours out of your weeks to sit down and learn and listen and hear what our departments needed to go forward to successfully operate this city of 70,000 people. So I really appreciate your willingness to be open-minded going forward with this budget. I also want to thank some key staff members. Obviously, our Office of Finance and Accounting, you'll hear from Sam Barris and Jeff Spalding momentarily. They put in countless hours. Matt Light, Deputy Mayor in our office, has really been our point person from the Mayor's office to spearhead this. He's the yin to my yang, and he is a great advocate for this city, and I appreciate him. I also appreciate Chad Connect for really representing public safety in a budget of this size. Roughly 45% of the budget is public safety. That's job number one of our city, and Chad does a phenomenal job helping to advocate on behalf of our police and fire going forward. So I wanted to thank those folks. Goal number one in conversation with each one of you was to make sure that we presented you with a fiscally sound budget, a budget that spends less than revenues that we bring in, and I'm proud that we're able to do that tonight. We're also able with this budget to embark on a multi-year process of investing our reserve dollars into long-term assets within the city of Noblesville. Those long-term investments are aimed at growing our assessed value and our economic footprint here in the city, helping to give us the ability to continue to invest down the road for future generations of Millers here in our community. So we're excited that we're able to embark on that. We feel like that is a very safe, conservative effort that we lay forward. It's an effort that we will phase out over several years. It's an effort that we will check in with throughout each one of those years to make sure that the fiscal situation of our spending matches the fiscal and economic climate of which we live in on a daily basis. Just a few key items of this. Like I said, this budget spends less than the revenues we bring in. It holds our $1.10 tax rate the same. So that is a tax rate we established several years ago. We have been able to maintain that tax rate going forward. I think that's very key. There's also a few key investments I'd like to just highlight, and it actually pairs well with Sandy Stewart's presentation. We'll be investing an additional $50,000 for a facade grant program aimed at our historic districts. as we start to invest in new corridors within our community, making sure that we are reinvesting our dollars into a facade grant program aimed at our historic district, we think is key to our city's future success. An additional $280,000 new dollars that will be invested in Old Town sidewalks. That seems to be a key component for a lot of folks living in Old Town. We have some great historic roads and sidewalks. Well, with those historic roads and sidewalks comes some great historic maintenance issues. And so we'll be investing some new dollars to preserve those going forward. And then finally, you'll see some new staff members here. And ones I want to highlight, we're adding 3 new police personnel as well as 3 new fire personnel to continue to make sure that our priority number 1 in our community is public safety. We'll be setting aside additional $6 million of revenues aimed directly at capital projects within our community. You'll see some additional roundabouts coming online that require a city match in 2022. So that $6 million will go towards long-term capital assets. And then finally, some dollars set aside for our overall well-being coalition, which we have highlighted a lot over the last 20 months, and a coalition chaired by Dr. Beth Niedermeyer, Noblesville Schools, and myself. Will be setting aside some resources aimed at promoting, discussing, and enhancing the overall wellness of our community. So I'm proud of this budget. I'm proud of the people who worked on behalf of this budget. I think it's a budget that aims to spend taxpayer dollars wisely, and I think it's one that we all can find projects within it that we're all very passionate about. So with that, I thank you for your attention. I'll turn it over to my friends at OFA. I believe Jeff Spalding or Sam Barris will take it over from here and will be more longer-winded than I am. So thank you so much for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll let Sam hook up, and then, yeah, we are doing a 3-man tag team on the budget. I'm going to cover a few technical aspects of the budget ordinance that you have in front of you, and then Sam will actually go through a summary of the budget more in the way that we actually look at it from an organizational perspective. But again, in your packets, there is a copy of this document that looks like this, and this is the official introduced budget ordinance that you have before you, and this reflects the structure and the way the budget must be published using the state's gateway system defined by the Department of Local Government Finance. And a couple things to understand about the document is the budget numbers, the levy numbers, and the tax rate that are represented in here won't match exactly the numbers that are in the presentation, but there are good reasons for that are understood, and they're mostly tactical. But there are a few items that are reflected in the published budget, total budget amount, that we don't think about from the standpoint of managing the city's budget. The 2 best examples and the largest dollar amounts are for our 1-year bond, which you'll hear about in the official published budget, and in an ordinance that we'll talk about later. It's budgeted at $5 million, but the current plan is for that to be about $4.1 million. And in all of our budget materials, when we're looking at our total budget, we're counting it at $4.1 million because that's what we actually plan to do. And I can get into the reasons why it's in here at a higher amount if somebody wants to have that side discussion. And then there's another amount in the official published budget, which is an appropriation from the rainy day fund, which is not a planned expenditure of the city, but as part of a legal requirement with regard to one of our past economic development projects. One of the credit enhancement requirements for that project was that we would budget an amount in the annual budget to cover the debt service should the planned funding source not be available. But in our budget numbers, that's not an amount that we plan to spend, but from a legal technical standpoint, it's included in the total numbers here. And then the published levy amounts and the tax rate amounts here, as the mayor mentioned, we're committed. There will actually be a separate resolution that you all pass that is committing us to a $1.10 tax rate, and that's what we will do. But when you submit your budgets and levies to the state, you're actually encouraged by the Department of Local Government Finance to adjust them upward slightly because there are any number of potential changes that happen with assessed values or decisions about allocation of levy, that they encourage you to publish these and budget them at a slightly higher amount, but in the actual adopted budget that we pass, these will be adjusted down to the actual amounts. But as long as we publish and advertise them at the higher amounts, then we maintain that flexibility. So as you might notice, we've talked about a $1.10 tax rate. This document has a total tax rate of $1.20, but that is not what we plan to actually levy. So with that, that's kind of the technical summary of the official document you have in front of you. And now, unless you have questions about that document, I'll hand it over to Sam, and he'll talk about the actual operational budget for the city.
All right, thank you. Mayor Jensen did a really good job giving a high-level overview of the budget. He's correct that I will be more long-winded than he was, but I will try to be mercifully concise as possible. Just want to highlight a couple things before diving into the particulars of the budget. This concept of one-time versus ongoing spending is very important in the context of this particular budget and budgets to come, especially for a community like Noblesville that has strong tax-based growth, but also has strong cash reserves. An important part of responsible budget management is to make sure that your ongoing spending commitments are aligned with your ongoing stream of revenue, so that in an individual year you have a structural balance between ongoing spending and ongoing revenue. To the extent that you're spending against cash reserves, you want to make sure that that spending is on one-time items that don't incur future obligations, that you don't get yourself into a bad fiscal situation down the line. So I think council members understand this, but just for any member of the public listening, by way of an example, the city has a 5-year fiscal plan that we use to make sure we're staying within our fiscal parameters. And if council were to approve a $80,000 increase to hire a new employee in the fiscal plan, that would cost us $400,000, because the $80,000 would show up in each of the 5 years, versus $80,000 for a one-time equipment purchase just costs us $80,000 in that 1 year. So there's a big difference between an ongoing commitment and a one-time commitment. Another kind of technical matter, the promotional fund you've heard about, especially if you're on finance committee, it's going away. There's going to be a separate ordinance, I guess, before the end of the year that asks council to formally eliminate it. Its purpose is become superfluous over time, and any expenditures from it will just shift to the general fund starting next year. So budget in perspective, Mayor Jensen hit on these points probably better than I will, but essentially he's correct. You know, a year ago we were giving bad news to the council, bad news to the mayor about what COVID-19 would mean for the city's fiscal situation. And it wasn't just us doing that. Obviously, that was the consensus opinion among economists and budget offices across the country. Fortunately, the impacts, not just on us, but on many local governments, has not been as severe as feared. And in fact, our fiscal position is almost as strong as it was prior to COVID, especially when you factor in one-time influxes of money through various pieces of federal legislation. So to that end, our reserve balances are strong. If you've been on council for a while, they've been growing. Almost every year they've been growing. And those reserve balances shield us from future downturns, but also provide us with opportunities to make one-time investments in capital projects. And the city does have a lot of capital needs, as you all know. So going into 2022, we're expecting that our core operational funds will have a balance of about $36 million combined. This budget does anticipate spending down up to about $5 million of those reserve balances. But again, the crucial part is it's spending down those balances with one-time investments in capital projects, and ongoing spending commitments in this budget would be less than the revenues that we expect that we're going to bring in 2022. So you continue to have a structurally balanced budget. In terms of budget growth, because of that one-time investment in capital projects. You see pretty big budget growth from the base level, about 15%. But again, netting out the one-time spending, it's more like a 5.8% increase. So that concept will be important throughout this presentation. And just as a note, a lot of the numbers I'm talking about are budget numbers, they're appropriations. So just keep in mind, it's almost impossible to spend 100% of your budget, even if you try as hard as you can. So this year, for example, we're expecting to revert about $2 million of the 2021 budget. We reverted about $4 million last year. So just keep that in mind, that budgets are not necessarily the same as spending. This slide basically makes some comparisons of the 2022 introduced budget to the base and to 2021 budget. There's a few different columns where we've broken up the budget into different fund groupings. The one on the left is all of the budgeted funds, including debt service. The one in the middle excludes debt service and pension obligations. And then the one on the right is kind of your core operational funds. It includes the general fund, but also funds that receive a portion of our property taxes or our local income tax distributions. So I'm not going to talk about all these numbers, thankfully for everybody, but the all budgeted funds column, you can see that the introduced budget is $92.5 million. Again, that's, if you net out the one-time spending, that's a 5.8% increase from the base budget, which I think council members are familiar with. So if there's any questions about the base, happy to answer that. But that is kind of our reference point for our steady state, ongoing, previously approved commitments. So that slide dealt with some comparisons of how big the budget is, basically. What this slide does is show some information about 2022 expected expenses, revenues, and cash balances. And we've, again, included some different fund groupings because sometimes people have questions specifically about the general fund or rainy day fund. We normally like to, again, look at this total max levy and lit fund group because we think it's the most reasonable representation of kind of your core flexible money that you have to spend on flexible purposes. So again, we're expecting 2022 cash balance to start at almost 36 million. And by the end of 2022, due to the strategic spend down of resources on capital projects, we'd expect that number to be a little bit above 30 million. Again, if you put the one-time spending aside, you're actually running a surplus of $2 million. So the idea is while the strategic spend down is envisioned as a few years process, if things went more negatively than we hope that they will or expect them to, you can stop making those investments in capital projects and you'll still have revenues that meet the ongoing needs of the city. So that's the idea. By the way, if anybody has a question, please just stop or yell at me or wave or something. Budgeted revenues, this is again for all budgeted civil city funds. Total is $90.1 million. That's an estimate for 2022. Of that, almost 80% is local taxes, and the other about 21% is a variety of other smaller miscellaneous sources, including intergovernmental transfers. So like in that 90.1 would be the second installment of the money from the federal ARPA legislation. On the right-hand side, you can see just the local tax portion of that, which is a lot of times what people focus on. The bulk of that is property taxes, it's fairly obvious, and then local income taxes are the next bigger component. And you'll see the newly approved wheel tax is in there as well, although it's obviously much smaller than the two bigger categories. This is just a breakdown of where the revenues are being deposited in terms of funds. So you can see that max levy and lit fund grouping is where our most of our revenues are going. On the right-hand side, because people sometimes have obviously and rightly have a special interest in property taxes, you can see of our expected $37.7 million of property tax revenue, about 71% is from our maximum property tax levy. 4.3% goes to the Cumulative Capital Development Fund that has its own 5-cent tax rate that the council approves every spring. And then about a quarter goes to debt service. That's both existing debt service on prior projects and also the one-year bond that we use to set our $1.10 tax rate. Jeff will be talking about that in introducing that ordinance tonight as well. Expenditures. This is just the total budget. That's that $92.5 million number. A lot of the times we're going to talk about our operational fund budget. That's going to be the 81% plus the 7%. So the operational fund budget excludes debt service and pension obligations. It's 88% of the total, just for your reference. Here again, this is just showing you that the base was 80.4. The introduced budget is 92.5. 12.1 is the total difference, which is split into one-time increases of $7.4 million, ongoing increases of $4.7 million. Of the 12.1, you're going to see most of it is for capital expenditures and services and other charges. A lot of that's going to be one-time design costs associated with capital projects, and then 3.4 million is on personal services, so people. This chart basically just breaks up the increases by department. You're going to see certain departments here are overrepresented, like street improvement and rehabilitation, planning and economic development, parks improvement and rehabilitation. That's just because of the investment in capital projects. That's where that money goes. But in case you want to see this by department, here it is. Talking about the ongoing increases more specifically, because again, these are commitments that will be incurred, not just in 2022, but in future years as well, we expect, are 15 new full-time positions. One of those is actually being mostly offset by the elimination of 2 part-time positions within the street department, so it's really more like 14. But the total cost of that is $1.4 million. All of those new positions were included in departmental presentations to the council throughout August, so there's nothing that made it in there that wasn't part of those presentations. So you would have heard about them from the departments directly. There's $1.6 million for compensation adjustments. Of that, $600,000, this is a little weird, this is for the 2% COLA adjustment that was already approved in July, that was funded in 2021 by underspending of our budget. This is basically asking the council to approve that as a permanent increase going forward. And then there's $1 million for other pay adjustments that are not yet allocated out to any specific position or department. These are going to be made based on the compensation study that is underway and being finalized. We hope to have more information for you soon, but certainly before the end of the year, those decisions will be made about how to best allocate that money, and a plan will be presented to the Finance Committee. So that money is budgeted in contingency effectively, but is solely designated for compensation adjustments. There's a list of some other things here, some of them highlighted by Mayor Jensen. There's money for trails maintenance, which is for upkeep of existing trails to maintain those assets, and then a bunch of other miscellaneous adjustments, including some in the personal service category for things like additional overtime, special pay certifications for public safety personnel, etc. On the one-time spending front, I listed some things here, but the main thing you need to know is that the overwhelming majority of the $7.4 million is for major capital projects on economic development, street improvement and rehab, and parks improvements. This is how it's allocated in the budget. Obviously, the breakdown of exactly what projects move forward will depend on a variety of factors, but this is how it's allocated at the moment. So moving away from adjustments and just to the total budget, this is that $92.5 million total budget number broken down by department. You can see the 2 biggest departments are fire and police, over 40% of the budget. And then after that is street. We break parks into several different categories, but collectively it adds up to about 8% of the budget, as does planning and economic development and our executive and admin functions. This next slide just gives you the same breakdown, but it's just for our operational funds, so essentially excluding debt service. You can see that public safety is a bigger chunk of this. It's about 45%, as the mayor mentioned earlier. Really, the main differences here are that the debt service is mostly allocated to things like street improvements and park improvements and stuff, so those categories are a smaller chunk of this pie. And then here is the debt service, just for reference. Most of our debt service is incurred on behalf of street improvements, so makes sense. Here's the budget by expense category. Again, this is the total budget, so once we're back to including debt service, 54% of it is for personal services. That 300 series amount includes the debt service payments. Here it is without debt service, so for the operational budget, over 60% is for personal service. I just think it's helpful to visualize the fact that indeed most of our budget is for people, I think as you would expect, but it's just important to keep in mind. Back to capital funding. This is just basically a breakdown of what resources are in the budget for major capital projects. So some of these things are recurring items that have been in the budget in prior years. So $3.6 million has been in the budget in past years for road resurfacing projects. There's usually $250,000 in the budget for minor park improvements and rehab projects. The main difference here is there's about $6 million of additional one-time funding for major capital projects. And then at the bottom, you can see the one-year bond, which we're projecting is going to give us about $4 million of proceeds as well. So in total, this budget allocates a little over $14 million to major capital. That doesn't include some things that are happening within departments' operational budgets for improvements to City Hall and other city-owned buildings. So this budget makes a substantial investment in the city's infrastructure, street and otherwise. Just a few other notable things. These aren't necessarily new or changes in the budget, but we think they're important to keep in mind. Most importantly, employer-paid health insurance premiums are over 10% of the total budget. Just again, this is on this list because it's important to not forget that that is a huge chunk of our costs. That $9.6 million is just the civil city employer paid premiums. It doesn't include the employee paid premiums. It doesn't include contributions from the wastewater utility. So it's a big chunk of change, as is property and casualty insurance contribution, which is a little under $800,000. There's still a subsidy in here for park programs, including golf. So as those, probably all of you will remember, the idea for our park programs and golf operations is that they are by and large self-supporting. They bring in enough revenue to cover the vast majority of their costs. However, in past years, we have subsidized a small portion of their operations from other civil city funds. We're hopeful that it'll be less than $200,000, but that's what's in the budget, which is unchanged from prior years. And then there's money in the budget for contingency. So contingency appropriations have been going down over time. It's just a hair down from last year, but it's broadly unchanged. A small portion of that is for personal services, so pay bumps within the salary ordinance that are minor, and then the rest of it's for non-personal service items, about $1 million. That is the end. I don't know if I was concise, but it's over, so. Unless there's any questions.
Very nicely done, Sam.
Well done. Any questions?
No, just a comment. I appreciate the administration and finance office going through this budget. I know it was long. You've been working on a lot longer than the public realizes. And I also appreciate that we are spending down some of our capital reserves. We're not a for-profit organization. And there are some needs that out there that do need to be addressed, and I appreciate the council administration addressing those this time.
Any other comments or questions?
Mr. President?
Yeah.
I'll just also point out for the public that are here that the city of Noblesville employs 440 employees. So when you look at the cost for personnel, it's a large organization, and we need those people to be able to help run the city and to keep our city safe. So, big cost, it's a big budget, but that's because we've got the people there doing the work that we need them to do.
Any other comments, questions? If not, I will open up the public hearing for the 2022 operating budgets.
Mr. President, seeing no one come forward, I would move that we close the public hearing.
Second.
Motion to close the public hearing for ordinance 610921 in a second. There's a hand vote. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. 8-0. It is closed. Thank you. Council to consider ordinance 630921, an ordinance authorizing the issuance and the sale of short-term bonds of the city for the purpose of providing funds to be used for the cost of certain capital improvement projects.
Move to introduce.
Second.
Jeff Spalding.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the council, Jeff Spalding, CFO and Controller, and this is the ordinance for the infamous one-year bond that was referred to just previously, and it's one of two items you'll see here for this, and this is the authorization of the one-year bond, and if you'll see in how I've drafted the ordinance does authorize a one-year bond of up to $5 million, but with a targeted amount of about $4.1 million. I'm trying to find the first page. And the reason for that gap, again, is there are many moving parts with a municipal budget, and as we've referred to a number of times, this desire to target a $1.10 tax rate, which I think is a very good, policy by the council. To do that based on these other moving parts, depending on certain things that happen with excess levy appeal, which we'll talk about later, the sizing of this bond may change between now and the end of the year. But if everything goes as planned, as referenced in here, it will be sized at $4,071,605. But again, your authorization here is for a bond of up to $5 million. If you have any additional questions, I can answer them, or we can move on to the next.
Any questions? Thank you. Next, council to consider ordinance 640921, an ordinance appropriating the proceeds of the capital projects short-term general obligation bonds of 2021 and establishing a public hearing.
Move to introduce.
Second.
Mr. Spalding.
Yes, again, this is, probably the more interesting end of this action. This is the funds that we are anticipating receiving from this bond and the appropriation thereof. And what you will notice, the most relevant item within this ordinance, other than the authority to spend the money, is Exhibit A, which lays out for you the anticipated use. Again, it's assuming that we actually issue a bond for $4,071,605, but it also lays out on here that if we do issue a larger bond, up to $5 million, that there would be additional proceeds available, but doesn't allocate those to a project. So if you have any questions about that, I'm happy to take those as well.
Any questions?
President,
Mr. O'Connor.
I would move that we establish a public hearing for ordinance 64-09-21 at our next regularly scheduled meeting. I don't know what that date is.
26th.
26th?
28th,
What's today?
14th.
All right, so 28th.
Second.
There is a motion to establish a public hearing for ordinance 640921 at the September 28th meeting. In a second, there's a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 8-0. Council to consider ordinance 650921, an ordinance to amend a government use overlay, R1GUO, for Noblesville schools to include wireless communication service facility at 1106 North 16th Street.
Motion to introduce.
Second.
Denise Ashelman.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm back to talk to you about cell tower again. Hopefully under much better circumstances than last time. So the proposed tower will go right here. There's a softball field, and then the track for the middle school east is located right there. The 21.1 acre site is on the east side of 16th Street and is part of the middle school east campus. The property is currently zoned R1 GUO, and the petitioner is proposing to install a wireless telecommunications service facility, in layman's terms, a cell tower, on the property in this approximate location. This is the zoomed-in view. So they would be installing a brand-new, during construction, this drive would be gravel. And then once they finish construction, they would then pave this driveway back to their lease area. The cell towers, per the UDO, because schools are considered a unit of government, are considered a conditional use. Because it's a school, it's actually a government use overlay. It's a special consideration or an amendment to that government use overlay. So their lease area for their tower is a 50 by 50 area. It would be a 185-foot tower with a 4-foot lightning rod on top. And there is space for up to 4 providers on the antenna, or I'm sorry, on the tower. So AT&T would be the top one, and then there's space for 3 more. And the schools also have an option to add their own equipment to this tower as well. So the lease area is set back approximately 290 feet from their western property line, so along 16th Street, and then 114 feet from the south, which is Crownland Cemetery. The current access, or the access that they're proposing, there are currently some bleachers for the softball field. They'll actually be moving those around to the other side so they don't lose the seating capacity. And this is just a reminder that wireless telecommunications service facilities are regulated by multiple layers of government. And one of the things is that the ultimate authority on approving these is the FCC, or the Federal Communications Commission, and basic guidelines and specific limitations for local and state government to follow are outlined in their Federal Communications Act. It does preserve the state and local authority for zoning and land use decisions, but sets forth some very specific limitations for consideration of those approvals. And this act specifically states that state and local government may not unreasonably discriminate amongst providers who provide a functionally equivalent service, and we may not regulate facilities in such a manner as to prohibit them or effectively prohibit them by making them so restrictive they can't put them in anywhere. We do have to act on the requests in a reasonable time frame, and we also cannot consider the health effects of the radio frequency on whether we are going to make a decision to approve or deny this request. Just a couple photos. They did photo sims for us. Apparently I lost them. No, I'm fine. They were in your packet. They've submitted and provided to you views from different areas around the cemetery. This does come to you with a positive recommendation from the Plan Commission. We did have 2 abstentions, but I believe it was 8-0-2.
Any questions? Presenter is here. Would you like to say add anything? Anybody? Rogers?
His attorney is also here. Did you have anything you wanted to add?
Mr. Menchaca is, oh, I'm sorry.
Nothing material to add. Just want to recognize that here, if there are questions, attorney for the petitioner, Kyle Russell-Terrence with Denton, standing in for Matt Price. Thank you.
Menchaca, thank you for your service and thank you for your patience this evening.
Thank you, Mr. President. Council, Israel Menchaca, 5509 Allison Way. Last time we were pretty rough on AT&T about the original placement of the cell tower. We had a few meetings with Mr. Rogers from AT&T. We all agreed on this new location, and we feel that's a better location than what was originally proposed. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming back in. Not very many people do that and come back and say when something's resolved. So thank you. Appreciate it.
I might get a pair of pants.
I appreciate AT&T reaching out to the groups and working together. It was really, thank you. Any questions?
Just a comment, Mr. President, I would, echo what was just said. I mean, it's rare that we get people to work together, and you'd like to see it happen more often, but in this case, I think it worked out for everybody concerned, so glad to see it.
Thank you. Okay, we'll see you in 2 weeks. Council to consider ordinance 660921, an ordinance creating chapter 132 of the city's code of ordinances, an ordinance violations bureau.
Move to introduce.
Second.
Lindsay Bennett.
Good evening, council. I would like to talk about this one and the next one together because they kind of go hand in hand.
Can we read that one also?
Sure.
Council to also consider ordinance 670921, an ordinance amending chapter 70, 72, and 132 of the city's code of ordinances.
Move to introduce.
Second.
Okay, now you're up.
Thank you, Mr. President. And just for the record, Lindsay Bennett, City Attorney. So as you are all aware, we have the Levinson garage coming online fairly soon. So because we have a new garage coming online, we wanted to take a look at not only how we were going to administer the garage, but how we were going to enforce the usage. And it was decided that a third party would probably be a better use of time and effort to enforce the garage and also maintain the garage. And then we started looking at downtown parking as a whole, and we thought, that third party would probably be in a better position to enforce downtown parking. So in doing that, we took a look at our ordinances, and there were some changes that needed to be made in order to allow that third party to come in and actually do the work that we need them to do. So while we were doing that, we did a little bit of cleanup as well, and we changed a few things to reflect what current practice is. Some of these haven't been touched since 1989, so there was a little bit of a change in procedure since then. Just high level, we have removed the parking violations from the general scheme of the fines that are in chapter 72. So, I'm sorry, chapter 70. So if you recall, in 2019, there was an amendment done, and there was a whole, called a scheme of fines. It was, day 1 through 7, it was $20, and then every few days it increased to $110. Well, this proposal is to just make a $25 fine if you have a parking violation, and then after 30 days, if you don't pay it or you don't deny it and appeal it to city court, then it's $50. So it makes it very user-friendly. It's not trying to figure out, oh, shoot, I left the ticket in my car, and what day is it, and what's the fine? So I wanted to try to simplify that. The Ordinance Violations Bureau, though, is, which is the first ordinance that you read, we are creating that because many cities have Ordinance Violations Bureau, and their purpose is for things like this, where you have a low fine that you want to have a centralized location for somebody to come in and say, I have a parking ticket, here's my money, and then they can walk out the door. Right now, the city court, the police department is administering it, and they're doing a great job. But again, that third party is going to be taking over this. And so this was a way for us to appoint that third party as the OVB clerk. They will have the authority to actually take those tickets, and they will account for them, and then they will turn them over to the city. One of the great things about the Ordinance Violations Bureau is if somebody who does want to challenge the ticket, court costs do not apply. So if they go in and they lose, the fine is still $25 or $50 if it's after 30 days. Right now, if they go in and they challenge a ticket, let's say they are on day 37, the fine is $110 plus court costs of $135.50. That gets to be pretty expensive for a parking ticket. So we thought, just frankly, this was a more fair way of doing it. I don't know about you guys, but I've had a few parking tickets in my life, and I'm okay paying $25, $50, but once you start getting into the $150, $250, it just, just didn't seem very fair. So all of the parking tickets, and only the parking tickets at this time, will be paid to the OVB. So that Ordinance Violations Bureau ordinance actually sets out every single parking ordinance and its fine. There were a couple of exceptions. One is the handicap parking. It's actually $100 by statute. And so after 30 days, that will double to $200. So a person can come in, admit the ticket and pay the ticket, or deny the ticket within 30 days. If they deny it or don't pay within 30 days, it actually gets referred to my office, and then we file an enforcement action. And again, those court costs would not apply. There's a couple of other notable changes in there. There's been a change of authority from City Council to the Board of Public Works for basically determining some of the parking restrictions. So where we're going to limit parking for 2 hours, where we're going to limit it for 4 hours, where we're going to charge $2, things like that. So that will be all under the purview of the Board of Public Works, which by statute is probably the more appropriate place. Again, these haven't been changed since 1989, so I think the 1989 statutes were probably following an old statute. And then we also changed the authority from the police chief to the Board of Public Works to establish parking spaces for people with physical disabilities, otherwise known as handicap parking. And then we added a 72-hour consecutive hour parking limit on public streets for motor vehicles or trailers of any kind. We updated the language from parking meters to paid parking technology because we're now using kiosks and apps, not necessarily putting coins in meters anymore. The Board of Works will have the authority to administer those parking spaces, determine where they're going to go, what the fees are going to be, the zones, the technology, and they have the ability to contract with a third party to do those things. We also have a current parking meter fund, but I'm not sure that it's been codified, so we went ahead and codified it. And then we've also deleted language referring to a parking meter policeman, and I think that one was actually from the 60s. I'll have to go back and look, but that was a very old language. And instead, the Board of Public Works now has the authority to appoint special police officers just for this purpose. So again, the third party will be able to have an employee that the Board of Public Works can say, for this limited purpose, you have the ability to enforce parking tickets. There were some updates on residential and non-residential permits. We don't use hang tags anymore. We updated the permit fees, and then, of course, allow the third party to enforce and administer the parking permits. So also towing and booting, we kind of moved that around, made it under enforcement, so it's a little bit more intuitive to read. If a vehicle has 3 or more parking violations that are unpaid for 40 days or more, then they can be towed or booted. And actually, they're using what's called a barnacle now. Chad can probably better explain it, but it is probably what it sounds like. It goes on your windshield, it sticks, there's a code that you have to get after you pay your tickets, and then it gets released and they fold it up and take it back to the third party enforcement agency. Another thing that I wanted to do was there was a lot of references to exhibits, and I was reading it and I'm like, where do you find this exhibit? If I can't find it, I can't imagine the general public, our residents, are going to be able to find it. So I took all of that information and put it into schedules in Chapter 78, so it's all written out there, so everyone can see very clearly what the schedules look like. So probably are curious what that's going to look like once some of these changes take effect. And this is kind of an easy way of seeing what the parking is going to look like. It actually doesn't change a whole lot. I think the biggest change is probably the orange lot. The cost is going up a little bit per hour for the orange lot. The orange lot's about 20 spaces. It's predominantly supposed to be used for people just kind of running in to do some quick shopping. We do have lots of free parking. There's some permit parking, and if you see the Levinson, we have the first 4 hours free, and then it's $2 every hour after that. This might also be helpful to kind of compare what is going to be done. A lot of it is going to stay the same, but this will also allow us, whenever the Village at Federal Hill garage comes online, we can simply add it into a schedule, and it will be, you know, something that we can enforce based on the proposed language and the new schedule. I know I've covered a lot. I've tried to be very concise because I know we have a lot on the agenda tonight, but I'm happy to take any questions that you may have.
I really appreciate that this has always been a way to get better customer service downtown and has not felt like a revenue stream or a punitive situation. I appreciate the approach that the administration's taken with this one. Mr.
Under the new ordinance, I assume in 2 weeks will be the last that the council will hear about parking.
Oh, I'm certain.
I mean, at that point, it goes to the Board of Works and
Oh.
we're done? Is that correct?
Yeah, yes. Question mark? Yeah, so you still have the ordinances. So if there's language in the ordinance that you want to change, you still have the authority to do that. But as far as making those schedules that say, you know, the City Hall East Lot is always free or it's a permit, if we find that people are abusing that, then the Board of Works can change that schedule by resolution and say, you know what, we're not going to have always free here. We're going to have permitted parking, or we're going to have a 2-hour time limit here, or whatever the case may be. And that's part of the third-party enforcement company. That's something that they're going to assist us with.
And I don't have a big issue with it, but I guess my point is that any questions that come to us regarding parking should at that point be directed to the mayor. Because the Board of Works controls it, we don't.
Yes.
Right, that's
Yeah,
right.
and someone in the mayor's office will field those questions.
And
Point
send
of
those
check.
questions to the Board of Public Works.
I think he just wanted to get it on public record.
President,
Yes.
just one question. Where does the Ordinance Violations Bureau clerk reside?
So they are actually going to be in the police
Police
department.
department?
Yeah, they're going to clear out a space. Chad Connect, who has worked extensively on this, along with his team at the police department and also planning and zoning and engineering. It's been a true team effort. Can maybe speak a little bit more on where that person's going to go if you're curious. It is a office that's in the police department. So you'll have the police department, city court, and the parking ordinance violations clerk right there all in one spot.
I was going to say more for the public's benefit, although I've had a ticket or two in my day, but you want them to know where they are going to have to go to settle the ticket, so.
And all that information will be on the actual ticket
Yeah.
that they receive, plus, you know, the fine schedule and how to appeal the ticket if they want to.
Any other questions? No questions about parking? All right. See you in 2 weeks.
All right, thank you.
Miscellaneous number 1, council to consider resolution RC 5021, a resolution approving an economic development agreement with K&J Investments 2 LLC for 1448 Connor Street. Chuck Haberman.
Good evening, council.
Evening.
I am here for your consideration of the economic development agreement with K&J Investments, which you may know as Meyer Foods, or better know or recognize as Culver's Restaurants. So they operate 10 Indiana locations, and they have over 750 employees at those locations. And this economic development agreement is to incentivize their retention and expansion of their corporate headquarters here in Noblesville. You may be familiar with the old Noblesville High School and former Boys and Girls Club. They have acquired that and renovated it, and their investment has been, the improvements to that property have been about $2.7 million. They intend to hire roughly 10 new employees and with an average salary of $57,000. And so we felt it was appropriate to incentivize their commitment to Noblesville through a forgivable loan to the tune of $350,000. We also have representatives from the company here if you have any more specific questions about the company. And I'm happy to answer any questions about the EDA if you have them.
Any questions? Mr. O'Connor?
Good evening, Chuck.
How you doing?
So with this action that you're proposing, that this property, I think at the present time, is not taxable. This
Correct.
will then
So
become
this
a
will-
taxable property, correct?
So this project will put this property on the tax roll for the first time in history ever. So that's an exciting thing for the city.
Any other questions? If there are no questions,
President,
yes.
I would move that we approve Resolution RC-50-21 as presented.
Second?
There's a motion to approve RC 5021 and a second. There's a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 7 opposed, and I'll abstain. I was the architect, so I'll abstain.
Thank you.
New ordinances for discussion continued. Council to consider ordinance 680921, an ordinance authorizing the city of Noblesville, Indiana to fund its taxable economic development revenue note, series 2021, and approving and authorizing other actions in respect to.
Motion to introduce?
Second.
Mr. Haberman.
Hi. So this is an ordinance authorizing us to take action on this economic development agreement and approving the mechanism in which we will incentivize the project.
That's it. Any questions? No questions. I guess we'll see you back in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Right, no questions. We're worn out. Proposed development presentations. Number 1, council to consider introductory information for proposed residential plan development on approximately 19 acres and containing 45 empty nester single-family units in the 5700, 5800 block of the north side of East 191st Street and west of Little Chicago Road in Noblesville Township. Caitlin Doffer?
Oh, by the way, Caitlin was a last-minute scratch, so I will let our new presenter introduce himself. And I tried to be fancy here, so this is not gonna work.
There we go. All right, thank you. Yes, Caitlin had to go to another meeting tonight, so my name is Christian Rector. I am the Vice President of Land Acquisition Entitlement for Arbor and Silverthorne Homes. I'm also a 4-year resident of Noblesville. I'm a little embarrassed to admit that this is my first council meeting, but it was certainly an interesting one to come to, and I'm happy to know that our city's financial plan is in good order. So thank you all for your service. Tonight I'm here to introduce a proposed new community right here in Noblesville, Red Fox Point. It's been a while since Arbor has been here, especially our own project that is developed. For any of you that do not know Arbor, we have been based in Indianapolis for 25 years. We were family owned and operated up until 2018 when we had the opportunity to join the Berkshire Hathaway family of companies. We have continued to operate just as we did and are still completely controlled here locally. We take pride in who we are. We are committed to our core principles. I take pride in being a great place to work and having an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. For this project specifically, it is 19 acres. The map shows you where it is on the northwest corner of Little Chicago and 191st Street. We are surrounded almost entirely by residential communities, Retreat at Mill Grove, Schaefer Woods, Connor Crossing, and Albany Ridge. This next slide shows where our proposed density falls relative to the surrounding communities. One thing I do want to point out, for those that are familiar with Arbor Homes, this project is one of our first ones as an age-targeted community. It is not our traditional Arbor product that was recently built in Cranbrook. These are ranch floor plans that are designed to allow people to age in place in a home. We're excited about this product. We think there is a need for it. We have just begun sales of it in 2 communities, one in Greenwood, one in Madison County, just across the county line from Fishers. We're about to begin our model in Westfield, and we hope to be able to bring this product here to Noblesville. This project is 19 acres, is currently designed. It has 44 lots for 2.3 units per acre. We include open space and a trail that goes just about around the entire community, connecting the trail out along Little Chicago, and then wrapping around to the north and coming back down to 191st Street there. As I mentioned, this is our destination product line, as it'll be called. We have 5 ranch floor plans ranging from just over 1,500 square feet to over 3,200 square feet with loft options. We have numerous elevations given different front elevations, brick, siding, design options on there. It will be a low-maintenance community as a part of that age-targeted demographic. That includes full yard sod and irrigation for every home's yard. The HOA will handle the mowing and general maintenance for each yard. People will have the opportunity to plant additional shrubs, maintain their own garden. Beyond that, but the basic level of maintenance, including mowing and snow removal, will be taken care of. The DCCRs of the community, as a part of that age-targeted, in addition to all ranch floor plans, it will restrict the ability to have a playground, trampoline, basketball goals, those types of things, because it is not age restricted, it is age targeted, but we have those mechanisms to encourage that demographic. Here are a few elevations that'll be considered. One thing I'll point out as we get to the architectural standards is vinyl is prohibited. When we go to ARB, we will be asking for a few deviations from the standard architectural guidelines. We are substantially similar to everything that is surrounding us, but because it is a ranch-only neighborhood, there are a few things that we think make sense to deviate on a little bit. As I mentioned, ARB, this is an introduction. We do expect to have some changes as we go through this process. Between ARB, TAC, we are working on scheduling a neighborhood meeting with the residents surrounding our community so that we can have them come out, hear any concerns that they have before we move forward to Plan Commission, hopefully come back with a positive recommendation from them to see you for a vote. Last thing I will point out, in addition to the elevations, the exterior features, we are very proud of our design center that we have at our office. It's a 3,900 square foot area with professional design staff that allows every buyer to come through and make their individual unique selections as they build out their product. So I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, and thank you for your time tonight.
Any questions?
I have a few.
Yes.
I'll try not to take too long. But first, thanks for being here. What's the average price point going to be between your 1,500 to 3,200 square feet? Do you have a feel for what that number is?
If we were selling these today, we think the ASP would be right around $350,000. Again, I want to stress that that is if these lots were developed and for sale today. As you guys probably know, lumber and pricing of materials has been fluctuating a little bit, and sales prices have been increasing significantly. So it's hard to say exactly what those costs are going to do 2
Is that
years
on the
out.
high
when we
end
hope
of
to be done.
350?
What's that?
Is that the high end of 350?
That's probably the average.
Average? Average sales price. Yep, got it. The rear elevations, and these are meant to be kind of an open dialogue, but on the properties that would abut Little Chicago and 191st Street, I think you may hear this at, maybe you won't hear it at TAC, but typically we've looked and asked for developers to try to put some kind of an amenity or an architectural feature on those.
They will definitely hear it at ARB tomorrow morning, so, yeah.
Anyway,
In a
I
week, whenever we.
don't want to be
They're gonna hear it
redundant,
at ARB,
but I thought
yes.
I'd better put that out there for you. So it looks like it would be, I don't know, 10 of these, 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, yeah. So just, I don't know, heads up. And typically it's been a sun porch or breakfast nook or something that would, from an architectural perspective, be somewhat interesting on the backside. So
one of the great things about this product is many of them come with design covered patios, knowing that people want outdoor entertainment spaces. So I think hopefully we'll be prepared well for that comment.
Good.
This looks like at 45 units, it's an infill project, and most of the utilities, I assume, 191st Street's in great shape. There's not a lot of city burden here.
That is correct. We know sewer and water are immediately across the street with Schaefer Woods. The retention pond is to the north because that is where our drainage outlet is. And we have worked with our neighbor up there to get an easement so we can tie into the legal drain as it cuts across the property.
Any other questions?
I would just say I do a little work on the entrance signage because I don't know that that's consistent with what's up and down Little Chicago. I'd have to make the drive, but I think most of them are more concrete, brick in nature.
Landscaped a little.
Landscape.
Take a look at that.
I mean, I know that's not a big deal, but you want it to at least be consistent with what you've got up and down Little Chicago. So take a look at that, if you would.
Yeah, we'll look at what Schaefer has directly to our south, where we line up as well.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
You too.
Miscellaneous, or not miscellaneous, development agreement, or development presentation number 2. Council to consider introductory information for a proposed residential plan development on approximately 17.4 acres and containing 123 townhome units in the 17,250 and 17,350 block on the west side of Hazeldale Road and south of Midland Trace Trail in Noblesville Township. Whole group of people. Derek Hayes, Jim Schinover,
Sorry. I'm
John
taking-
Davishewitz, Denise Ashland.
No. Just
Anybody
tech
else
support
wanna
right
come
now.
up?
There you go.
Good evening. I'm actually, my name's not on there. I'm Joe Lenahan. I'm with Althoff Homes, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to kind of introduce this project. John Dobashevitz will provide most of the details, and I'm here to answer any questions. Again, I'm grateful to be here. This is a new community that we are proposing. Before I get started, for those that don't know, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about Althoff Homes. We're a family-owned business. 3 brothers own the business today. We build pretty much exclusively in Indiana. Our home office is in Northwest Indiana. That's where I'm from. And we also build in Fort Wayne, and then, of course, we build here in Indianapolis. Several years ago, we started looking for new projects and started building homes here in the Indianapolis market. Actually, the city of Noblesville is where our second project was, Waterman Crossing. which we're kind of finishing up now. So we're really excited about this new project that we have. As you can see, it's located on the west side of Hazeldell Road. It's just a little bit south of 32. It actually borders the Midland Trace Trail. And what we have here is a for-sale townhome, two-story townhome product. It's rear-loaded, which provides some really neat opportunities, we think, for having all of the architecture, the strong architecture up front on the buildings. And the way we kind of locate the buildings on the site plan is to sort of face that architecture out, and you'll see some of that as John goes through the proposal. We also think this particular site has some really neat open spaces with some green space up front, which really leaves it open, that kind of central park. And then, of course, the greatest asset for the community, in my opinion, is the Midland Trace Trail, which we have some really strong connections to, and you'll kind of see some renderings of that. So I'll be here, I'm going to have a seat, and then I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe, and good evening. For the record, John Dobashewitz with Nelson and Frankenberger. We do represent Olthoff Homes, and as noted, the matter before you this evening is the introduction of a PD ordinance. The request seeks to rezone the real estate to a planned development in order to develop a for-sale townhome community, which will expand homeownership opportunities in Noblesville, which includes low maintenance and significant open space amenities, as Joe alluded to. You can see on the exhibit on display the site, as Joe indicated, is on the west side of Hazeldell, south of and adjacent to the Midland Trail. It's approximately 17 acres in size, and it's east of the Hazeldell Elementary School as well as the Noblesville Youth Sports Fields, and north of the existing Hazeldell Woods subdivision. It's a transitional site between future retail, which is anticipated on the north side of the Midland Trace Trail along the south side of 32, and existing single-family residential, which I indicated exists to our south. Again, it's adjacent to the Midland with the opportunity for pedestrian connectivity that we'll review as we look at our site plan. And most importantly, it's designated under your comprehensive plan as an infill designation, which we believe is well-positioned to accommodate an expanded housing option within the community, which doesn't exist today, which is a townhome product that Olthoff is proposing. This exhibit that's on display now is the preliminary development plan. It's a colored illustration of that. There's engineered plans that are under review on TAC on Wednesday, but this is a color version of that plan, which is for illustrative purposes and for the Plan Commission hearing. There's 123 townhomes proposed. Again, it's a for-sale, low-maintenance housing option for buyers in the Noblesville community. The Midland Trail is activated through front-facing entrances, as Joe indicated. Those dwellings that you see that are facing the Midland would have their front door facing that, and we've got a streetscape of that I'll show you in a minute. And all the garages are alley-fed, and that's another new feature that hasn't been seen in Noblesville in some time, where all the homes will be accessed via vehicular access will be from an alley rather than from the street. As indicated, all garages would access the internal alley. Open space views are enhanced along Hazeldell. As you can see, along Hazeldell, there's a significant setback there with dry detention as well as detention. It's heavily landscaped. So the view along Hazeldell, as much as it exists today, as you're driving by, with the enhancement of landscaping and these units further removed to the west. There's pedestrian connectivity, which was the focus of the design. You'll see multiple asphalt trails as well as sidewalks and the connections to the Midland. There's both active and passive recreation opportunities that I'll review momentarily, which exist in excess of 6 acres of open space. And the site design frames the public access with enhanced visibility and use.
Getting a Windows update.
Yeah, we're gonna remind me in
60
about
minutes.
60 minutes.
There we go.
Technology, it's great. Regarding architecture, the front elevations are enhanced with treatments such as covered porches, masonry, board and batten, and combination of dormers that you see in the top illustration on display now. Again, no front-facing garage doors anywhere in the project. They're all accessed via alleys. There's enhanced use of masonry in high visibility areas. We know we're going to hear that at ARB. We took the first crack at that. We know there'll be discussion regarding what elevations would be more suitable for enhanced architectural features. But again, you'll find that in the ordinance for consideration by ARB when they meet, which I understand won't be tomorrow morning. Right. Site elevations are enhanced in critical locations as well. The image on the bottom right-hand corner is the side elevation of the dwelling. It's a combination of horizontal siding, board and batten, as well as stone and other brick masonry. There's no vinyl proposed for use in this project, but the horizontal siding would be fiber cement and then other board and batten as well as masonry materials. The anticipated price or sale price for the project is between $240,000 and $270,000 in price. Regarding amenities, there's connectivity in 3 separate locations to the Midland Trail. There's a dog park planned for the space within internal to the neighborhood for the residents. As I indicated, there's a large park space and well over 6 acres of open space throughout the project. There's a public gathering area within the community as well. All these details are included in the packet that we distributed for your consideration this evening. And the public spaces are framed with the fronts of homes facing those public spaces. And what does that lead to? It leads to what we're referring to as an attention to detail. Homes activate the trail. There's garage access via alleys. Public gathering areas are provided, details of which are at the bottom of this exhibit or fully detailed in the informational submittal that we transmitted to you that'll be reviewed. But these are fully detailed spaces with landscaping and other features that are part of the ordinance included for construction as part of the development. Perimeter landscape buffering and Hazeldale streetscapes have been enhanced, and the neighborhood design is enhancing through the view corridors as well as the production of public spaces that we hope that the public and residents will find attractive. Finally, in conclusion, we are scheduled to appear in front of the Plan Commission on October 18th. That'll occur after we have a neighborhood meeting with surrounding residents to gather their input as well as ARB consideration. We feel like right now we're in the first inning, if you will, with the introduction, and we'll collect additional input from the council as well as Plan Commission and staff, and then make a presentation in front of the Plan Commission on the 18th of October and return back to you for adoption consideration at a later date. We appreciate your time this evening. Be glad to collect additional comments now or as we move forward throughout the process. Thank you.
Any questions or comments?
Mr. President?
Yeah.
I have a question. Is this a product that you have built in the Indianapolis area?
We
Or would
have
this be the first time?
We have a similar product that we're building in Westfield right now. This is slightly different. The architecture is different on this, and these units are actually just 2 feet wider, but it's a similar concept where it's a rear-loaded 2-story townhome. And we're just completing some of those there.
Share with us where in Westfield?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
It's at 191st Street. If you head west out of Noblesville on 191st Street, it's 3/4 of a mile west of Gray Road, generally at the intersection of Grassy Branch. There, where Crossroads Church is, adjacent to them.
It's in a community called Lindley Run.
This is a lot of detention. Is this the detention number?
Yes, they are. The plans have been fully engineered through what's the primary plat level of detail that will be considered by TAC on Thursday. It's a combination of dry and wet detention.
Yeah.
I just would comment, John, I can appreciate the townhomes, and I kind of think that might fit somewhere there, but I look at this and I feel like this is kind of one of our prime real estates right there backing the Midland Trace, and then across the street, then you can just cross 32, you can walk to some food and some different things, so there's some walkability there. But when I look at some of the things, especially like page 17 and stuff, it seems very chintzy looking. I wish I could come up with a better word, but it just doesn't look like something that would be on prime real estate and something that looks really, really nice. And so I just am hesitant with the looks of this for where it is for how much of the real estate. I feel like we've got really good real estate there right on Midland Trace, and something we're going to be really trying to tote and get better. And so that's just probably my biggest concern.
For the benefit of the rest of the council, page 17 and public is an image that illustrates the detached garages and the rear of the dwellings will be along the alley side of the development. And we'll work on that. We'll work on that with ARB. And as a reminder, that's the alley view. We were asked to take a look at that in particular because it faces the south perimeter of the real estate. So we'll work on that and make
not just that one though. I would just say the whole thing doesn't look quite as prime real estate as I would like. Appealing. Yeah, that's Beth. Thank you for that word, Mr. Aaron.
It is facing the alley, but also the Midland Trace jogs down, and there's a north-south portion, and these garages face that part of the Midland Trace.
On the west side, that's correct. Yeah. And we got that comment from staff as we were working our way through it, and we recognized there would need to be extensive buffering along there, even landscaping and berming that would be above and beyond what you might normally see. But I hear the concern. I understand.
You could even flip buildings 4 and 5 and have the same, reverse them.
Yeah, we debated it back and forth. We like the idea that, especially 4 faces as you're driving in, so there was a little bit of a unique situation there, but we can look at that, consider that.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned you have private alleys that are going to access all these garages. Are you going to have alleys? Are those private, or are they going to be city, or what are they going to be?
They'll be private, they'll be maintained as by the HOA in easements, in common area.
With that, the trash pickup, is that something we do projects, or is this so we've got a lot of issues with alleys when it comes to trash pickup. We have a lot of issues in Old Town based on the old alleys we have. But in private streets in general, we've got a lot of issues with. I also am not really buying into the architecture on this at this point. I'm kind of curious what your other project looks like over in Westfield. But amenities, what kind of amenity packages in this other than the trail? You've got 145 residents or 43 or whatever.
There's if I can point to it here, within the development. If you see on the screen right in this space here, there's a proposed dog park that I described. There's a park area internal to the site. These are gathering spaces that are detailed in the documents that you have in front of you, as well as the pathway connectivity to the three locations to the Midland Trail.
These homes are usually inhabited by young professionals, a lot of times people that are maybe single or couples that are maybe buying their first home, not a lot of kids. So we usually don't put parks like playgrounds and things because they're not generally needed. So, we like to provide green space for active, and then we've got some of the passive stuff with the seating areas that John was mentioning. We've also got one located up by the turn in the trail that was mentioned before. But we're open to other suggestions too. I mean, we value your feedback on that.
President,
Yes.
I've got a couple of questions. Have you given any thought to, and as I'm thinking through this, there's 123 townhomes. I don't mind townhomes. I think some of the architecture, I'd rather see the enhanced architecture than the standard across the footprint. But I'm looking at buildings 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and I'm just trying to envision how do you make this a little more diverse as opposed to it being 123 townhomes? Could you put some empty nester product in there that might bring in a different vibe to the community because it is walkable or will be? You got the Midland Trays, but even once some of this other property to the north and even at the promenade side starts to develop, I think that would be attractive to some, maybe some empty nesters that want to be close to the amenities because they will develop. I mean, these kinds of projects are going to cause some of that commercial product to develop. So, it changes the flavor in my mind a little bit. I guess I concur to some degree with some of the other comments. The townhomes, I don't really have a problem with those. I think it's a product that young professionals want. The price point probably fits for them. But you want to make them as aesthetically pleasing as possible because, as Mr. Boyd said, I mean, it's to some degree it's beachfront property when you're right on the trail. So you want to make sure that we, the city, and of course for yourselves, maximize that and take advantage of, the amenities. So those are just observations, really. How many parking spots are there, John, throughout? When I have no idea, I didn't try to count them, but it looks like there's quite a few.
each individual unit would have that detached two-stall garage. And then in addition to that, there's available on-street parking as well as additional parking spaces that you see along the north side here.
That's what I thought.
Within this space. And we aren't asking for a modification through the PUD to reduce the parking requirement that the city has established for this use. I can get you the number, but I just wanted to assure you that we're meeting the standard the city has for parking.
When you get into density like this and you've got townhomes and you get friends coming over to visit, or you got whatever the situation, parking's always and has been a challenge. So I appreciate that. I'm glad it meets the standard I thought it would, but
So I know this is a newer product to the community and the council hasn't seen a lot of townhomes, and I would encourage you to visit the site in Westfield where Old Toff is building today. And if you have suggestions or modifications, if you could convey that either directly to us or to staff, and we'll work to address those through the ARB process to bring you back an aesthetic design that the ARB and Planning Commission are positive on.
How's the absorption rate in Westfield? How are those are they?
I don't have it's good. I mean, yeah, it's really meeting a need. And we've built products similar to this for a long time, so we really kind of understand this, probably more than 20 years. Not here, but, so it's been quite good.
Build any of these in Valpo?
No, but Crown Point, Highland, quite a few in Crown Point.
It's your stomping
We built
grounds. You
Valpo,
can go
but
up and
not-
check them out.
Yeah, I'll have to go back home and see what's going on.
Yeah, to echo Mr. Boyce, I have no doubt that there's a need for this. 100%. We see the stats behind it. I think my consensus is just that this should be a wow factor. This is a great corner and across from the trailhead. There are going to be tons of people.
And the bottom right-hand illustration is a view of the connection along the Midland. There's a sidewalk that runs that would be perpendicular to the Midland, that would be in the foreground outside of that image. A sidewalk that would run in front of the units, and then these units in between them. That's a view looking from the Midland into the site. Of course, there's preserved landscaping that'll be along the Midland. It won't be vacated. It'll be preserved trees that are along that edge.
HOA maintain the property?
The exteriors and the surrounding landscaping.
What about the section between your house and your garage? Do you own that?
That is a private courtyard.
Okay.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
You talked about private streets, so.
Private alleys. The streets are public. So if we go back and we look at the site plan, the intersection with Hazeldale into the site into the cul-de-sac, that is all public street. And then when you exit off of that public street onto the alleyways between the units and behind, those are what's in the common areas and maintained by the HOA. And that's as told to us by engineering. We didn't dictate that. We were advised by engineering that thou shalt main thy own alleys.
And we're fine. We do it that way all the time. The HOA can provide all the services for that. And just one thing I want to kind of point out is that when you're, there's the value in doing the rear loaded is that you don't have garages on the front. We build houses with garages on the front. That's why a lot of people want them. That's where mine's at. But you can provide a lot of, architectural appeal, and I'll be looking for ways that I can enhance it because I'm hearing those comments. But in any event, when you're doing the rear loaded townhome, you can really either attach the garage, and usually what they do is kind of push it underneath and make them almost like 2.5 stories, or you can separate it like this. We like to do the detached because we find that people really like that private courtyard. You have some outdoor private courtyard space. And then when you push them in, and that's fine too, that's a way to do it, but usually what you end up with then is a balcony, and you've got decks and different things out on that balcony, which again is fine because that's the space that they have for it, but we find that this is a much cleaner look. And of course, yes, you can't have the alley zigging and zagging all the time, so it does kind of create a corridor, if you will, of garages, and we've done some things to enhance that, but really that's the trade-off, is by getting the garages off the front, you move them to the rear, and then you do things to treat the exteriors and the views and things, and provide the enhancements that we can.
And I was asking more about with the street or the ways for public safety purposes, as well as when we talked about trash collection, on how does all of that work, so.
And we'll bring that up with police and fire, as well as, we'll have to bring it up independently with the city's trash provider to find what they would view as the best way to do their collection.
I did bring up, Ms. Wiles brought up a good point, is that being all alleys, being private alleys, our fire department has to be able to reach all those units along the Midland back there. And all the garages in the back. I'd be curious what TAC has to say about that when it's all done. How much room is between the product, the townhome, or the townhome and the garage, this courtyard area?
16 feet.
16? Okay. And these are 20-foot wide units, or
22 foot wide.
22 wide.
These ones are.
Which is larger than the product that's in Westfield that we, it's a similar design, but larger than that product.
I really appreciate this. Is something very different than we've seen before in Noblesville. And we just saw in our housing study, this addresses a lot of needs, but I also agree that architecture is just coming up a little short right now. I like this product here. I think it's very appropriate with the walkability and its relationship to some of the retail that's coming, but I think the architecture just needs a little more punch, yeah. Any other questions, comments?
Covered mine.
Thanks for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Council number 3. Council to consider introductory information for proposed residential plan development on approximately 21 acres to include 62 two-family units and 84 single-family units in the 14600 and 14700 block on the east side of Maryland Road and north of Campus Parkway. Mr. Lazenby and Mr. Noblesville, I assume.
Good evening. Give me a moment here to plug in. There we go. Pretty prepared. Good evening, everyone. As Mr. President said, my name is David Lesenby with Onyx and East. We are headquartered here in Indianapolis, a local company. We've got offices in 4 other cities in the country. Here tonight to present a new project. With me is Audrey Streitz from my office here in Indianapolis. Also with me are John Noblesville and Jim Shinover from Nelson and Frankenberger. I'm going to give you a little bit background on us, a little bit overview of the project. Happy to answer any questions tonight. Excited to have a project here in Noblesville. I know there's a lot of detailed questions to get to that we will be going through, ARB, of course, and TAC. We've had pretty good meetings so far with staff to get to where we are tonight. So excited to talk to you about what really is a new project, not just for Noblesville, but really for the metro area. So Onyx and East, as I mentioned, well, our headquarters is here. We've got about 50 people in the company. We started about 6 years ago. We're kind of got a brand and pretty much known for our creative product, infill housing, providing housing where people can live close to parks and trails, entertainment, restaurants, close to where they work. So we do a lot of urban redevelopment. In Indianapolis, we have projects in Carmel, likewise in Tampa and St. Pete, and now we're expanding throughout the Midwest as well. We have since, as we've been expanding our geography, we've been expanding our product line. So this has brought us to other places such as Noblesville. And so this is really the first time we've present a product like this to you tonight. It's actually, I'm a 35-year resident of Hamilton County, and I still haven't done a project in Noblesville until now, so I'm pretty excited about that as well. So this site location is at 146th or Campus Parkway and Maryland Road. It's about 1 mile from Hamilton Town Center, as you can see, up to the north. Can I point? I don't know if I can point. Oh, there we go. Up to the northwest of Hamilton Town Center. It's on a little over 21 acres. It's a little over $40 million of investment. The homes are 3 and 4 bedrooms. They're all detached or attached, condominium style, but they are for lease. It's professionally managed on site. All have 2-car garages, private outdoor space, front porch living. We use the same finishes, our upgraded interiors that we've become known for in our product on this project. So not changing anything in that. So I'll talk a little bit more about why that is and who that, the customer that we're targeting here a little bit later. I want to go through a little bit more of the product itself and some of the site details. So we looked at your comprehensive plan. We're pretty well aware of it. You've studied housing more than any other community that I know in your housing study. You desire things like expanding your housing types and different price points and having attainable housing and accessible for a lot of people. But there's some details in that comp plan about site planning and streets connecting and making them pedestrian friendly, hiding garages, these types of things we just do everywhere. If you look at any of our product, this is just how we do development, and we always have. So we feel like we fit pretty well. It was pretty easy for us to come up with a plan that we thought fit the comprehensive plan. This site in particular is a combination of infill residential and residential, but we have, because of the product and the site planning, some of the challenges there, we have filed it as a PD. So some of those things, here's the site plan itself that I think are important to note. As you see the site and you come into the site, coming through a couple of memorable ponds there at the front that are obviously the lowest point of the site. The outlet is on the other side of Maryland Road, so that's the reason why those two are there. We kind of tried to celebrate that entrance by doing that as big as they had to be. And the first thing you see there is our front porches. All of the alleys present that opportunity there in the interior blocks. And then the perimeter are duplex units, which I'll get into here in a minute, that have shared driveways. The center amenity has a pool and a pool house, and then an open green lawn. And then there's tree preservation on the north, east, and south sides, and extensive tree preservation on the south side up along Campus Parkway. Here's a streetscape of the detached units. Again, hardy, masonry standard, front porch living. If you look on the screen, for those in the room may not be able to see it clear, but your screens might be a little bit better. There's private open space in between each home design. It's probably in your packet as well. So each home has its own private outdoor space as well as its front porch. And it's very important for people today, especially that are transitioning from an apartment to a single family home, the biggest thing that they want. I don't want to share a wall, and I want outdoor space. So that's what this product is doing. It's providing the opportunity for that. Here is the duplex product that is a round perimeter. Again, a shared driveway, but also private outdoor space on the side of each unit and front porch living. It's an image of the pool house. Sits in front of the pool. Important to have a gathering space for the community, kind of a focal element for people to get together. Why is there demand for this? Why is there demand for housing that's specifically built for rent? The biggest reason is our country is woefully underbuilt. For the last 10 years, there is a tremendous shortage of new housing, and it's part of the problem that we have today. That it's hard to find a home and prices have gone up a lot. Construction costs notwithstanding, that's contributed to it. But even without that, there's a shortage of housing in the country. What that has led to is people that otherwise would be buying a home are stuck in apartments. They don't really want to be, or they're stuck there too long. And so you have this supply and demand imbalance where you have large corporations, large equity funds in the country buying single-family homes, and you can go on any of their websites and see how many homes that they are renting out in subdivisions in Noblesville. And so this is a product that takes what is already happening, purpose builds it, professionally manages it, so that you no longer have individual renters in different subdivisions managing their own lawn and things. So it's the same customers are already here, or they're moving here from other places looking for that type of housing as they're getting started with their families, as they're moving out of an apartment, saving up for a down payment. They may be coming here 2 years for a job. So you get the idea of why most of these people are looking for single-family homes for rent in subdivisions, and here we're going to attract them to one place. So who's living in them? Everybody. Young families with children, households saving for a down payment. One of the things that is notable about these versus apartments is that they stay here for 2-3 times as long. They renew continuously. They stay there longer. It's a nicer unit. Of course, they're not sharing walls. It's a nicer community. Incomes are $70,000 to $120,000 a year. The rental rates here are $2,000 to $2,400 a month. So again, it is not an apartment. It is that step between someone living in an apartment and buying their first home or their second home. I'll leave you with a couple of shots of the views of what it looks like from 146th Street or Campus Parkway over the pond there at the corner. Obviously, what you notice and you see is the front porches, and then there's some limited mounding and buffering as you go down Campus Parkway. And then a shot overall of the community. I'm up here with John. If you guys have any other questions, happy to go into more detail if you'd like tonight. I think we have TAC meeting in 2 days and ARB in a couple of weeks.
So a couple of the same questions we heard before. Is the streets are public and the alleys are private?
That is correct.
Okay. It feels, and maybe it's just the way it's rendered, it feels woefully underparked.
It is highly parked. There's
Okay.
two-car garages for every unit, and there's 137 guest spaces.
Okay.
And then there's another 10 in that little parking lot by the pool.
I
So-
assumed it was rendered,
Yeah.
this is the way it's rendered, it just
Yeah.
doesn't.
Yeah, there's a lot of on-street parking here.
I think you'll also hear, I really appreciate the front elevation architecture. Again, this is something we've not seen. The comments you're going to get in ARB is the sides and the rears of the homes are a little short, but I really appreciate what you've done on the fronts of the houses.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So is this a model that you've done elsewhere, or this will be the first time?
This will be the first of this model. So we
Okay.
have 2 others in process in the metro area here, one in the Tampa metro, Columbus. So we are doing a lot at once, starting it. Yeah. But the product is similar to what we're building in our other product.
The 4-lease single family you've done before, but not this particular.
We've done single
Okay.
family like this.
Okay.
But not.
But purchase, owner occupied.
We've done it for purchase. We have not done it for rent, but yes, we've done it for purchase. Yeah.
And you said that you did another project in Carmel. Can you share with us what that project was?
I personally have done a lot of projects in Carmel, but in Onyx and East, the last 5 years, we're wrapping up construction in the village of West Clay. We've got one more building to build, we're finishing up sales there. And we just started construction on Melange, which is on the Monon, downtown Carmel, right by the fire station. Those are all for sale. Those are $650,000 to $1 million. And then Village of West Clay, we're like $400,000 to $450,000 wrapping up there. So we have a range. I mean, we're in some urban neighborhoods around downtown Indianapolis where we're selling homes from 300 to 400, on single scattered lots. We're buying homes and redeveloping. Our townhomes generally are in that range as well, 300 to 450, depending on where we are. But we've got, and then Tampa's a different market completely, but we're 500 to $1 million there as well.
I have a quick question. I don't know if it's for you or for Sarah. Does this border on Hyde Park, or is there a parcel in between? Yeah. So I saw like the natural, like I have the Hyde Park map up, and they have the natural area. I just didn't know if that's the eastern
There's two intervening parcels. One is owned by the utility.
Left one.
Is that a Duke substation there, John?
Yes. Yes.
So if you see the site outlined in red, and then there's a lighter colored square next to that, that's a parcel owned by Duke Energy. And then south of that square.
Up there.
Oh, yeah, so it's up in the upper left-hand corner, I'm sorry. And then Hyde Park is,
Yeah, doesn't Hyde Park start like right to the right of his mouse right now? The natural,
yes.
yeah, okay.
Sorry. I was off by it.
Mr. President,
Yeah.
David, on your detached units, you don't have any driveway.
We do not.
So when the garage is full, where do they park two cars?
Well, if they filled their garage with other things, they would park on the street, which we have ample parking, but we would
Out back
not
there,
suggest they
there's
do that.
room for two cars out there and along all those units?
Oh, two additional cars in front of every unit?
No, not two additional cars. If you can't get a car in a garage and you can't get it in the driveway because there's no driveway, the
Right.
car's got to be on the road, right?
That is, in that case, it would be.
Yes.
Yeah.
So my concern is, none of those have any driveways, so if the garage gets filled with stuff, then you're gonna have cars all along that alleyway, is that correct? Is that how you see that?
I would say if everybody filled their garage, everybody would park on the street, but we would have a serious management problem and we would not let that happen.
Okay.
We have a history of that in Noblesville, so.
Do you? Okay.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, we're accustomed to building where people just park in their garage because people just park in where we build, people park in the garage. So if that is new to me in Noblesville, that would be a management thing that we would deal with. Yeah.
And then on your shared wall units,
Yeah.
help me understand if they're out of the garage, in front of the garage, one car or two cars, can the other people get in their garage?
No, if you're in a shared driveway, you're not allowed to park in the driveway.
Okay,
Yeah,
so that's
that is
just,
not allowed.
that's a
Right.
known deal.
That is a known deal.
They know that.
That is correct.
So, okay.
Yep, we have thought through that detail, yeah.
I mean, that is nice about this being a for-rent product, is you have a management company, in a regular subdivision, and you fill your garage up, you park in the street, and there is a management tool here to.
Enforce not doing.
Enforce that, correct.
Right.
That's fine, but we had that same issue. And
Yeah, we've had
our
that
fire
before.
department couldn't get in and
Right.
ambulance service because of on-street parking. And my recommendation would be that you take some of these units out and put some additional parking into this project. The family comes over at Christmas and there's nowhere to park.
We've set up the streets wide enough so that there's parking on one side of every street on purpose, so that there's plenty of, there's 137 guest spaces for 146 units.
I think part of this, you may just want to stripe those in the next exhibit. I
Okay.
think it's just misleading in the rendering.
We have that exhibit,
Okay.
certainly can
Okay.
provide that. Yep.
Is that parking on the street or in the alley?
In the parking, in the street. There's no parking in the alley allowed.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's
So
not allowed.
You can't, yeah, so
No, it's not
you're not
physically-
allowing anybody to
No.
park against the
So,
garage sideways or anything like that?
I've done a lot of townhome development.
Where do you
We
live?
have studied this a lot, right? So we purposely don't do driveways long enough unless it is specifically required by somewhere, which in the village of West Clay, it was. It's the only time we have ever done driveways. And we don't do it because they have to be long enough for one. And then you got too much space back there. Then it's cluttered with cars and people just will park out there because they can. And then they can, and then they fill their garage with junk. No, the garage is for your car. And then if you put an 8-foot driveway or a 10-foot driveway or 11-foot driveway to do some halvesy thing, which I did once in Carmel, and then you got people parking sideways and it just doesn't work. So we do 5. You can't park in 5. You can't do anything in 5. So it's a 5-foot apron, 20 to 22-foot alley, whatever your engineers want us to do. And so that's all the alley is for, is to get into your garage. That's it.
I understand that, but I know human nature, and I drive through these neighborhoods, and they don't park in the garage, they park on the street, they park in front of the mailbox and the trash cans, and I think that staff, this is the second alley project we've looked at tonight. I think we've had one or two in the past, and I'd like to hear from police, fire, and staff whether we should be considering these alley projects, whether, you know, it's an ongoing issue. Parking, we're running into that problem all along. I don't know if our say you meet the requirements of parking?
We're way above the requirements.
You're way above?
Way above.
I don't know. To me, it's just a high density, a lot of density. Are you going to keep this project? Are you selling it? Or
No,
what's-
we're keeping it. Oh, we're keeping it.
You're keeping
Yeah,
yourself?
so
your
No,
company?
no to the answer of selling, but yes, we are keeping it. That is the goal. Yeah.
And Mr. Ayer, in addition to the communication we received from Noblesville Engineering on what they dictated in terms of the street widths and alley widths, we'll ask for direct communication from both police and fire to the planning commission as well as you.
I think another caveat here is the alley products are for sale products. This, again, has a management company that can manage, that's on-site, towing, ticketing.
The other parking problem that we had was management too. I mean, the one that came here quite a few times was
So anticipating this, you see our open space in the middle. You can cut in perpendicular parking all around that thing. I don't want to, but we could certainly provide a document that says we can do it. It's future if we need it, if it becomes a problem. You can cut in perpendicular parking all the way around that. I'd rather keep it for open space, but I anticipated this could be a conversation that we'd have.
President.
Yeah.
I sound a little like a broken record, I think, to John after the last one, but, my corporate headquarters are in Detroit, so I'm going into Michigan quite frequently, and you can go across the border and you can feel a difference in the roads, you can see a difference, and you just feel a difference when you go into Michigan. And with what Hyde Park is presented, it just seems so upscale, everything seems so nice, and I feel like you're driving down 146th Street, and this is gonna be similar to that going. Doesn't seem like it's nearly to that caliber, and that just scares me.
President?
Yes.
I guess I'll make the same comment. I'm a broken record too on these buildings that are gonna be facing Maryland Road, and I think maybe you'll talk about that in ARB tomorrow, but the flatbacks and
Yeah.
the amenities, and I mean, people will see those, and so, I think it's just one of those, I think we've been consistent about trying to make sure that anything you can see from a main thoroughfare, we want to try to make, if you're looking at the back of the home, and some of these you may not be, but some of them you are, need to put some kind of an amenity back there, so, I don't know, I think it just gives the development a little more of a appeal. And you can, sometimes berms are fine, but the landscaping, you got professional maintenance, that helps a lot.
Yeah, if you're going in the country, I totally get it, right? I mean, it's not a big deal, but like you said, you're going down a main thoroughfare with Maryland Road and with 146th, and you're coming out of Hamilton Town Center that looks nice, and then the Hyde Park project, it just seems like this is not of the same caliber for that same area. Like, there's places that this would go better, to me.
I think we need to go and see some of the products. Since they have not built in Noblesville, we're not quite sure what their finishes look like. So, I mean, I plan to do a road trip and see what it looks like.
Yeah, I can
And
do
then
it.
come back and provide some additional input.
Yep.
So.
Can you get us a list for the bus tour?
Sure.
Just a list, yeah.
Sure.
Yes.
I do have a question on that part there where 146th Street bends. Do you have any plans as landscaping? I know there's some natural trees there, and I tried to look it up.
There are.
There was some
Yeah,
overgrowth and
there
stuff.
are. That one's too dark on that screen. Site plan might be best. So, can I? There we go. There's the area. My arrow. So this parcel that looks like it is a separate parcel. It is part of this project. It is completely covered in trees, and we're not touching it. The reason why, part of the reason why, there's a large power transmission line running right through here. So we can't do any, that's why that's open. There's nothing that we can do in that. But we are berming and a little bit of mounding and trees here where we can on the backs of these units. Here you see all fronts. So here it transitions to some backed. So we put some buffer in there. And then it's the open easement, and then you're not gonna see anything because this is completely wooded. All the way down to here is part of our project. See, actually even off this exhibit.
I'm so used to going by there, but I just don't look to the left because it's a bean field now,
And there's some
so.
topo there. I don't think, and we can have our engineer do a section and see what that is really like, and how far away that really is. But it's doubtful there'd be any view at the
Gotta
back
be
of those
300-400 feet, I think.
Yeah, it's pretty
But-
far.
Any other questions?
Did you talk to HSE, the school district?
We have not.
You might want to do that, because if you're gonna have, how many units?
146.
And 2-3 bedroom, you're probably gonna have some students going to HSE, and
Probably.
I don't know if they pay attention to the agendas or not, but it might be a good idea just to touch base with them.
Okay.
They are building a new elementary school up the road, but it might be,
They do have a seat at the TAC committee, so for Thursday's meeting, they're one of the agencies.
they'll be aware of it.
They reviews plans and provides input on occasion. And we'll, to Mr. Boyce's comments, we'll take a look at the Hyde Park architectural requirements and buffering and transitioning. And if that's a bar that's been established that you're comfortable with, that'll be our goal to provide elevations and landscaping that's consistent with the quality that has been provided there, if that's a good example.
I mean, I'm not aware of our ever having done a development that is built like this, it's all rental. I don't think it's
No, it's
unprecedented here.
It has not been done here. If you look in Arizona, Texas, the Carolinas, Florida, every capital group in the country is placing money to do projects like this because there's it's the answer to people think it's the answer to the housing problem in the country. Because it's already happening everywhere. There's already rental homes in every subdivision. And so if those people choose to move to here, it opens up those homes for people to own them again. So it could be an equalizer for the housing problem in the country.
What kind of rents are you looking at on the single family?
1950 to 2400, 2450. Oh, I just gave you the full range. So, yeah, sorry.
That's full range,
that was the full
1900
range.
to 2500?
Yeah, the low 2000s, up to 2500.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, man.
Okay. Miscellaneous. Miscellaneous continued. Council to consider resolution RC 4921, a resolution regarding the 2022 high assessed value levy growth appeal. Mr. Spalding.
Yeah, Mr. President, members of the council, Jeff Spalding, CFO and Controller. And again, this resolution is associated with the overall budget presentation. And as many of you may be familiar with from past years, this is something that we have been doing the past few years, and it's associated with being in a fast-growing community, as you've been hearing about all these development projects. And basically, in state law, there is a defined statewide limit on how quickly you can grow your levy, but there is a provision within which a community can appeal to allow their levy to grow faster if they're a fast-growing community, which we are. And so basically what this resolution is doing is it's the council asking the controller to submit that request to the state. And the net effect is the normal levy growth for 2022 would be 4.3%, and this would allow us to appeal to a 7.2% levy growth. So that's what the resolution does.
Any comments or questions?
Mr. President,
Yes.
I would move that we approve Resolution RC-49-21 as presented.
Second.
There's a motion to approve Resolution RC 4921 and a second. There's a hand vote. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. 8-0. Thank you. Transfer, council to consider a transfer TA 0921, an appropriation transfer in the general fund to provide funding to cover costs associated with the State Board of Accounts 2020 audit. Sam Barris.
Thank you, council members. Sam Barris, OFA staff. As stated, this is a appropriation transfer of $90,000 from contingency to the Office of Finance and Accounting budget. Primarily, it is covering costs that were under budgeted as part of our annual CAFR prep. So that's consulting services for our accountants and also for under budgeting of the State Board of Accounts audit fee. There's about $250,000 remaining available in unallocated contingency, and that would cover this cost. And then we're hopeful that some of these CAFR prep costs are contained going forwards due to the addition of the deputy controller position, although obviously we'll have to see how that plays out in practice.
Any questions?
Mr. President,
Yes.
I would move that we approve TA-09-21 as presented.
Second.
The motion to approve transfer TA 0921 in a second. There's a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 8-0. Council comments. Charlene Cummins, thank you very much. Evelyn abandoned you this week, one of the largest,
Yeah, biggest meeting we've had.
biggest meeting we've had. Thank you, and I know you had a lot of changes at the last minute, and I really appreciate you put all this together, and very well done. Mr. Hare.
Real quick, keep in mind the Noblesville Preservation Alliance tour this weekend.
Yep.
And the car show downtown. I don't know if there's any concerts. I think there's one more on the square. I'm
It's
not
the
sure about it.
Aerosmith cover band, I
That's at
think.
Federal Hill, I think.
Yeah.
So I know last weekend, the whole downtown was jam-packed, busy. The
Mm-hmm.
concerts were all busy, so life was good in Noblesville, Indiana.
Any other comments?
Shout out to Sam and Jeff for all the work they did on the budget because, not to belabor the point, the mayor said it, but a lot of work goes into this and it goes on behind the scenes, and, you know, I think we came out with a really good product, and it'll give us some good direction going forward, and we've got some resources to make some things happen, and we'll keep it happening. So thanks for all your help.
Anybody else?